I'm particularly pleased to have a podium tonight because when I checked into the hotel this afternoon, I put my hand on the suitcase to open the zipper and immediately knew I didn't bring any shoes. And so I'm wearing sneakers tonight that I wore on the plane, and in talking to Colonel Howenstein and Mr. Cook, I said I would simply try to explain it away by saying that I was born in Buffalo. The other thing I would say is they are Nikes. And I have just learned by listening to a course on tape on the Peloponnesian Wars that Nike is the Greek word for victory. And I didn't know that, but I consider for myself having for the second time the honor to return here and speak to an audience at this university that I have a personal victory, and I thank you for having me back again. I thought I would talk tonight a little bit about what has been, for me at least, the most glaring absence in this interminable presidential campaign, and that's any kind of a debate on foreign policy. And I simply called my talk "America on the Road to Defeat: A Presidential Campaign Without a Foreign Policy Debate." Despite the seemingly endless nature of the presidential primaries and now the run-up to the general election, the presidential candidates, when there were 20 in the field, and now that there are only 2, and most of the media, have ensured that Americans have not heard anything remotely resembling a substantive foreign policy debate. While we have heard quirky and frankly silly assertions that sleeping with a president, serving as a prisoner of war, and setting records for using the word change constitute adequate commander-in-chief training, we have little tangible idea of what the 2 remaining candidates would do in the field of international affairs, save being reassured that someone would answer the phone at 3 a.m. Let me suggest that there has been no such debate because the candidates do not want one. Why? Well, because there are no differences other than matters of tone and shades of nuance regarding foreign policy between the 2 candidates. 3 examples should suffice on this score. Each gentleman is a rank and a reckless interventionist. Note that each took time out from campaigning to applaud the independence of Kosovo from Serbia, in which Washington and the feckless European Union have lit the fuse for the next Balkans war. They also took time out to approve the expansion of NATO, so that now America is committed to defend the sovereignty, if you can believe such a ridiculous thing, of Albania and Bulgaria. Last week, the largely clueless media tried to create the impression that there was a large substantive difference between Senator McCain and Senator Obama on fighting terrorism. There was no difference. McCain would hang Osama bin Laden on capture. Obama would try him first and then hang him. Both men and their parties are intent on maintaining the ineffective law enforcement approach to terrorism, what Presidents Bush and Clinton termed bringing the terrorists to justice one at a time, that has been the failed standard operating procedure of at least the last 3 administrations. More troubling, the campaign's foreign policy silence is based on each candidate's intention to maintain the now 35-year-old status quo in U.S. foreign policies toward the Muslim world, the impact of which is the single greatest force that motivates our Islamist enemies. This reality should disturb all Americans, but it should especially worry young Americans. For the maintenance of the status quo U.S. policies in the Muslim world means more war and almost inevitably the reintroduction of conscription. In mid-February, I published a book called Marching Toward Hell, America and Islam After Iraq, which tried to lay out for Americans the dangers to our country that have accumulated because of the relentless interventionism of their bipartisan governing class. My book suggests that those who think our Muslim world problems will end when Mr. Bush returns to Texas are badly mistaken, and that the next presidential term will see nothing but more war and escalating and human and economic damage resulting from the interventionism that both parties preach as if it was divine scripture. In short, 4 years hence, Americans will still be seeing their children's lives and the outrageous taxes they pay being continually wasted in other people's wars, especially other people's religious wars, in which there is no genuine U.S. national interest at stake. Although you would not know it from the candidates' rhetoric, nothing less than U.S. national security and the financial solvency of America are at risk in the years ahead. The reception my book is getting from the elite press has given me a small taste of the treatment Dr. Ron Paul received at its hands and those of his fellow candidates when he suggested that America was attacked on 9/11 because of what the U.S. government does in the Muslim world and not for how Americans live and think at home. Some reviews have taken a serious look at the book's argument, agreeing with some arguments, questioning others. But the New York Times Sunday Review discussed nothing in the book, simply denouncing it and me as a crude, simplistic, implicitly unpatriotic, and Machiavellian, and assigning it to the netherworld that Alexis de Tocqueville described as being outside that closed circle of permissible debate in America. After reading the review, I thought, now I know a bit about how Dr. Paul felt when Rudy Giuliani struck his patented Mussolini pose and denounced Paul's precisely true statement that U.S. policy in the Muslim world motivated the 9/11 attackers and is motivating the growing millions of our Islamist enemies. Interventionism, it seems, is holy gospel for our political class. To question the gospel is treason, and it excludes the questioner from public debate. Well, perhaps interventionism is so deeply ingrained in the U.S. governing elite and its media and academic acolytes that the issue cannot be taken on whole. It is, after all, a broad and multifaceted topic. Raising opposition to it as a whole allows men like El Duce Giuliani to avoid specifics and assail non-interventionists as appeasers and blame America firsters. Perhaps the best non-interventionists can do in this presidential cycle is to ask a limited number of specific questions which, if answered honestly, would show Americans how poorly their interventionist leaders are protecting them and how the defense of America is nowhere near a top priority for Senator McCain and Obama, notwithstanding their rhetoric. There are many obvious foreign policy-related questions to be asked of the two senators, but the media, for the most part, refuses to ask any. As long as the media, left, center, and right, neglect their duty to ask pointedly specific foreign policy questions, the candidates will be allowed to prattle on and call for universal health care, job creation programs, tax cuts or increases, and other domestic initiatives. Talk about domestic problems that will ease the economic downturn is palliative but empty talk. The past, present, and future costs of the interventionism championed by the candidates and their parties preclude massive domestic expenditures. The candidates know this, but will stay silent until after the inauguration, unless the media steps up to the plate and asks questions that need answering. Certainly other people could ask better questions than I can, but here are 10 specific questions that reflect the concerns I outlined in Marching Toward Hell. I think each merits a full and frank answer from our two would-be candidates. Each is followed by a proposed answer of my own, a form of which we really ought to hear if the candidate understands the threats America faces from its Islamist enemies, and perhaps more important, from its own legacy of failed and counterproductive foreign policies.